I think as many people in this room have felt over this past month, at times you feel the tears just coming off, pouring down your cheeks, as you realize that there is a certain style of a person that is no longer with us. You just touched on the idea of MS. And during this period of time, I know I mentioned it in my shul, that there's different levels in regard to MS and what people are really searching for and what they really represent. And we just lost a wonderful, there's nothing that I'm going to say that's really going to do justice. As we started off first by hearing from the Mechutin that in Ish Tsunua, the idea of what really was inside, there's no way to really describe all of those points. And then as you move on to the midas of MS, and whether I came from the east or the west when I came into the yeshiva, I'm not sure. But when I heard the news, my first reaction was, Rabbanan Shalom, why would you take such a person? I have a different list for you. I have people that I would prefer that you took instead of somebody like this. And then it made me think of the following, where the Rosh Yeshiva would always say, Hashem oihev tzadikim. Why does it have to say Hashem oihev tzadikim? He says, from here you see that there are certain tzadikim only the Rabbanan Shalom can love. And that made me think of the fact of what we actually lost. What is the chisaron? What was it that I was feeling and trying to give over to my tzibur? Everything's being mentioned, both in regard to Chabad, and then even in regard to Brisk. Remember, he used to say in yeshiva that Reb Chatzkel, when he was leaving Panovich, told him that whatever you do when you go back to America, make sure that you don't become a Rav. So he always said it to himself. He said, he's a fireman, yes. A policeman, yes. All those things are fine, but a Rav, that's the one thing that's off the list. You can't do that. He said he realized why is because as a Rav, you have a tzibur. And if you say what you think needs to be said, sometimes Sunday morning you'll wake up and there will be no tzibur. I can tell you that one of the brisk jokes that he had said over, I said over in the shul, and I lost one of my mispahalim. The MS. Yeshivas Ner Moshe. Yeshivas Ner Moshe of today is one style. Yeshivas Ner Moshe that so many of us went to was a different style. I would like to give you over a quick story that took place, and I think it encapsulates what the yeshiva represented, and at least one nakuda of what the Rosh Yeshiva represented. We were learning Shabbos that year. As we came across the Gemara, the Kol Ha'omer Vayachulu is Ki'ilu Mishtatif Ma'akadosh Baruch Hu B'Maaseh Bereishis. You start to go through the sugya, and you realize that that is the area that is used as a makar to say Vayachulu with two people as eidos. You start to go through the Gemara, looking at the Gemara, don't see where the makar is. The Maharsha says, Toiv Loimer B'Shnayim. Looking across, don't really see a makar. Mishnah Brura says, person Shahari Shemona Esrei, to make sure to do it together with everybody. Walked up to Rav Shalom. Rebbe, why do we say Vayechul like this? Where's the makar that it's Eidos? Rebbe David, bring me a Mishnah Brura. Couldn't believe it. I thought I missed it. Bring over the Mishnah Brura. He opens it up. Says right over here, Kol ha'omer vayechulu ki'ilu mishtatif ma'akadosh baruch hu b'maaseh bereishis. I said, Rebbe, all you're showing me is another shver makar. How do you become a partner after the fact? We're talking about the idea of the eidos. Where are we here to say anything about the eidos? There's plenty of kashas to ask on it in general. Reb David, if you don't have a makar, you won't do it. Okay. One. I walked to the back of the Beis Medrash the next day. I was also Zeichel Baruch Hashem to learn with Rosh Yeshiva for quite some time. And I said, Rebbe, what do we do? What's the makar? That's why I don't do it. Walked over to Reb Brody, and Reb Brody said, write it down. One day maybe you'll come across the teretz. I did. Shmooze for another time. How do you create a yeshiva that has three completely different mahalchim? Who is willing to do that? Who is willing to say to themselves, let's create a makom that has three completely different mahalchim? What pushes a person to do such a thing? What allows a person, besides for the obvious confidence, tremendous confidence, self-awareness and a healthy self-esteem, whatever yeshiva it is that I went to in high school, where I spent most of the time playing basketball, and I made it back there after a number of years. I went back to a dinner. And at that time, I was a Rebbe in Mountaindale, and I was living in South Fallsburg after 5 years in Eretz Yisrael and Kail, and I was living in South Fallsburg. And I came down to the dinner, and I met the mashgiach. I'm waiting online, and the mashgiach looks at me and he says, what's your name? I said, David Rub. And he says, what do you do now? I said, I live in South Fallsburg, and I'm a Rebbe in Mountaindale. You're a Rebbe? You see, you can never give up hope. Felt gewaldig. I called Rabbi Gurwitz, and I said, Rebbe, listen what just took place. He says to me, David, I'm very disappointed in you. I'm like, great, now you disappointed me too. He says, I'm disappointed in you. You understand people. I've seen that over the years. You truly understand people's tchunas hanefesh, you understand them. How can you let this person get to you? You know him. And then he went on to tell me the following. I said to him, Rebbe, you never get insulted? He says, in my life, I can't recall ever being insulted. Who is he to insult me? Emes. I will just read to you a little bit, and perhaps with that we'll be able to see the tznius, the tsunua part, because that's the part that is covered over. But he has a piece where he discusses emes, because the difference between the chacham and the goylam is moida ala emes. Being moida ala emes. And he quotes from the Divrei Shol on that Gemara, where the Gemara says, "Emes ne'ederes." Emes will be ne'ederes. Why is that? Shenasis adorim. This is his lashon. Tihia emes ne'ederes shenasim adorim. V'hainu shebe'emes nischalku l'machaloikes rabbis. V'chol echod tzoyek. Ach itonu ha'emes. Each group is going to say by themselves, the truth is only with me. V'im kain memela al yedei ze ne'edar ha'emes mikol v'kol. And because of that, the truth will be lost from everybody. Because if everybody thinks that the truth is only by them, you aren't open to hearing other positions. You aren't willing to listen that perhaps is another way of looking at something. Only somebody who has a true bikush for the emes, and somebody whose essence was one, that I am looking to see what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants from me in my life. As he so clearly stated to me, David, do you want to do what's easy or do you want to do what's right? Such a man represents emes, and such a person can have a yeshiva that I owe my entire life to, that was created on that premise of bringing in 3 different styles in one place. Because you can have one that will say, then you don't have a makar, you won't do it. Another one says, write it down. A third one says, that's why I don't. That is somebody who's not afraid of the emes. He embraces the emes. And to end off, Hashem ohev tzadikim, This is not one of the tzaddikim that only the Rebbeinu Shalom loves. This is one of the tzaddikim that we all loved. Continuing with the idea of emes, that there are many different groups that taina that they have it with them, and they're the ones that have the emes bilvad. We are now at those final stages of life within the world before we are finally greeted by Mashiach. V'im kain, harei zois tfilaseinu b'akashaseinu m'lifnei avinu shabashamayim. Sheniske b'kara b'yameinu l'geula hashlema, and I will quote him verbatim, al yedei Mashiach ha'amiti, amen kain yihi ratzon.